Secretary Clinton said, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. There is no classified material. Was that true?
There was classified material emailed.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
Of course, Trey Gowdy there hammering James Comey back during the original hearing back in July after he announced he wasn't going to prosecute Hillary Clinton. There's been some breaking news on this being reported by a couple of news organizations in the last few minutes. We will talk about it in just a few minutes, but the long and short of it is the Department of Justice Inspector General has just announced today that he's going to launch a review of the FBI investigation and specifically James Comey's release of information days before the election and how it might have impacted Hillary Clinton's election. Now, if that's not a political boondoggle, you tell me what is. More on that coming up in just a minute. First of all, to the subject of Obamacare and what happened last night. The Senate, late last night, early this morning, however you want to look at it, took the first steps to rolling back Obamacare. As promised, Fox News Radio's Jared Halpern is joining us right now with more on that. Jared, what did they do last night?
Well, they passed a budget resolution, which is going to serve as a vehicle for what will eventually become a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. The reason they did it through this budget reconciliation process is it cuts off a filibuster. So it only took a simple majority in the Senate, 51 votes. And so it passed on a party line vote. They would not have gotten 60, obviously, but they didn't need it. It kicks it over to the House. The House will vote on this budget resolution tomorrow. It is the first in several steps. It's not as if when the House passes this tomorrow, the Affordable Care Act is repealed. All this does is sets up basically instructions to relevant committees in the House and Senate to start working on the repeal process. And what we heard from Speaker Paul Ryan today is that it will go along with sort of a concurrent path of replacing the Affordable Care Act. Remember, we heard from the president-elect on this yesterday in his news conference. I know a lot of news sort of got buried because of the combative nature of parts of the news conference. And obviously some of the other bigger stories, right? There was the Russia stuff. But one thing that the president-elect was asked about was this notion of repealing the law before they replace the law. And that's always sort of been what the plan was from Republicans here. We've heard from Mitch McConnell and others who have said we're going to repeal it. We'll make sure that there's some sort of mechanism to allow for a transition, to allow us to start the process of replacing it. Well, you've heard from a growing number of Republicans, moderate Republicans and fiscal conservatives, more hawkish sort of conservatives who have said, we're not sure we want to vote on repeal without knowing exactly what the next steps include. And so that is sort of what will happen now through the next several weeks and probably months. Speaker Ryan today said they did not want a hard deadline because they want to, quote, make sure that they do it right. But that he has said in the past that they expect this legislation, in conjunction with some executive orders from President Trump, to happen during the calendar year of 2017.
Yeah, what we don't want to do is pull a Nancy Pelosi here, right?
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Yeah, so you don't want to throw out the bill before you know what's going to replace it. In other words, is kind of where we're going here. Now, Rand Paul, who purports to have a plan in mind, and he's a eye doctor, right? He's a physician.
Yeah.
He's projected a plan, but he voted against this last night, right?
Well, he voted against this budget reconciliation package for two reasons. One, because it does not include any sort of replacement legislation. He also voted on it from a conservative standpoint because the budget doesn't balance. It's not a balanced budget. And so, he wants that.
Okay.
So that was part of it, too. Because his argument is, listen, this is being billed by Republicans and Democrats as nothing more than the first steps in Obamacare repeal. When he said it's a budget resolution, and budget resolutions should matter. And what we pass in budget resolutions, should matter. So I think that's what you saw in that vote. I wouldn't read too much into it that he's somehow opposed to the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. He has talked about, though, as we've heard from other Republicans, wanting to know what they're voting for, right? And so that's where this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
He has a plan. Listen, there are a lot of plans out there. Speaker Ryan has released details of what a Republican alternative would look like. It, increases health savings accounts. It keeps some aspects of the Affordable Care Act, like covering pre-existing conditions, allowing you to stay on your parents' plan until you're 26. But there's also a belief, and you heard this from the president-elect as well, that they're probably not going to get their HHS secretary, who right now is the nominee, is Congressman Price, in place until February. It's based on the confirmation calendar, and obviously he will play a central role in whatever replacement looks like. And so you're going to see the Republicans move quickly on at least setting up the steps, getting everything in line to repeal and replace, but the actual implementation of it is still an awfully long ways away.
Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't sound like Senator Paul's ideas are that different than what Paul Ryan has talked about. So
no, I mean, listen, we've heard these ideas for a long time.
Yeah.
The difference is it was very easy to propose ideas when you knew they weren't going to become anything, right? Now you find yourself governing and needing to put it into implementation, and so people are going to want a say. We have a new administration coming in, which is going to want to obviously put its fingerprints on this, and so I think what the interesting timing issue will be is how much of this could get done before the 2018 midterm elections, and if that is a factor in all of this.
Right, right.
Because remember, those are not that far away, and major shifts in healthcare, you would imagine, would be something that Republicans were judged by one way or the other in those midterms.
Jared, I hate to put you on the spot here, but I'm going to anyway. Just before I came to you, I discussed this breaking news that
the Inspector General
the Inspector General report. Are we surprised by that? Is this a political move on the part of the administration?
The Obama administration, I think Press Secretary Josh Earnest said it didn't come from them. I'm not that surprised because there have been complaints from both Republicans and Democrats about some of what came out. I know that you had mentioned in your lead-up that this is going to look at sort of the release of that letter from Director Comey. My understanding is it's also going to look into whether or not some of the releases or some of the alleged heads-ups that were given from some officials to the Clinton campaign were proper as far as timing, and whether or not there was any proprietary or classified information that was shared with anybody, regardless of the campaign, that should not have been. So I think it's actually pretty wide-ranging, and I'm not entirely sure exactly what has prompted it, other than, listen, you know that there have been complaints about the FBI from both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. Usually that elicits the attention of an inspector general. That's what inspectors general are hired to do.
Does that IG cross administrations? Does he stay in place, or is he somebody that might?
I don't want to give an answer that I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
I think that's the case, but I am not sure.
I appreciate that. Jared Halpern from Fox News Radio, thanks for your input. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Yep, take care. Thank you. Jared does a great job there for Fox News Radio and covering Washington, and I thought he might have some insight on that, and lo and behold, he did. Just to reiterate that, if you didn't hear the first part of the conversation, the Department of Justice Inspector General, a guy named Michael Horowitz, has announced today that his office will launch a review of the actions taken by FBI Director Comey and the Department of Justice ahead of November's election. The IG will look at whether FBI Director James Comey's press conference and notifications to Congress days prior to the election concerning the Hillary Clinton email probe were appropriate under Department of Justice guidelines. The investigation in response to a number of requests from members of congressional oversight committees, various organizations, and the public, according to Horowitz. So was there pressure from the administration to get one more investigation rolling before they're out of office? Hard to say. Josh Earnest says no, but then again, he's not very earnest.